over a year now, the Prime Minister made a declaration in Parliament that parts of the Cockpit Country would have been demarcated as a protected area. To date, that area has not been gazetted. The ground truthing, which has commenced, has not been completed, and we are concerned about the pace at which that is being done. We're also concerned that, notwithstanding the fact that the protected area has not been gazetted, the government has issued a lease to the mining company Rwanda for mining to take place. We are aware that though mining has not taken place, the lease has been granted before the environment impact assessment was done. Presently, the environment impact assessment is being done, and we are hopeful that that will be shared in the soonest time with the residents for their comments. In terms of the Cockpit Country boundaries, there are concerns as to when that will be completed, and we are urging the government to move quickly to ensure that is being done. Dr. Susan Koenig will speak with us a little bit more in terms of the boundaries of the Cockpit Country. We are also concerned that and particularly the residents in Gibraltar St. Anne, is concerned about mining license 172, which allows mining to take place in the community. And although that is not in the designated protected area, it falls within the wider Cockpit Country. The physical and social effect on the community is alarming. Schools have been reduced in their attendance. Schools have lost teachers and are now forced to find replacement teachers in the short term. Dr. Clark, Reverend Clark, will be able to speak with us a little bit more in that regard. Then there's the issue of the dust nuisance and the compensation that is given to persons. There's the issue of the water quality and the potable water that is required in these communities. We do not believe that enough work is being done and enough pressure is being brought to bear on these bauxite companies to ensure that A, that mining is done in a way that is sustainable, and two, that mining is done in a way that reflects a care for the well-being and health of the communities. And again, we are calling on the government to ensure that sufficient steps are taken to recognize this right that all Jamaicans have to a clean and a healthy environment. Dr. Koenig.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Susan Koenig. I'm a wildlife researcher and biologist based in Windsor Research Center in northern Cockpit Country in Trelawney. I've been involved with the issue of the Cockpit Country for as long as I've been in Jamaica, which has been about 20 years. And as I've been here and learned more and more about the area, Cockpit Country has revealed much about itself to me. So as we have proceeded with trying to understand where Cockpit Country is in relation to what the Prime Minister presented for a Cockpit Country protected area boundary, there's still a lot of confusion with members of the public as far as what it means and where it is. So I came today to try and help resolve some of the confusion to make sure that we're all understanding, because if we don't understand, then we're going to continue to make some mistakes. So in November 2017, the Prime Minister, during his presentation to Parliament, presented actually two different boundaries. There was one, what has kind of been known as a core geomorphologic boundary, which just looked at some of the shape of the landscape. And then there was also another boundary, which we know is, he defined as the Cockpit Country protected area. And that protected area boundary looked at a number of different features. So it looked at the shape of the landscape, the limestone, it looked at the water resources, it looked at heritage. It built up all of these layers of information and then said, with this information, there is an area that deserves protection, and we're going to call that Cockpit Country protected area. Now, this has led to a lot of confusion because there's actually a larger area that we, the communities, have long since recognized as Cockpit Country. Some people might refer to it as the Cockpit Country Stakeholder Group boundary, but it actually is Cockpit Country defining itself for us. So Cockpit Country tells us where the underground water flows under the egg carton shape, the heritage that developed very specifically in relation to the physical structure of the landscape. So the heritage of the Maroons, heritage during emancipation, it all was shaped and influenced by the landscape, by the water resources. So when we look at all of those areas, there's actually a larger area of Cockpit Country landscape which is bigger than the Cockpit Country protected area. So we have what I would almost describe as now a core Cockpit Country protected area, but in order to actually keep Cockpit Country landscape and all of the Cockpit Country communities, just because you're outside of the protected area boundary defined by the Prime Minister, doesn't mean you're not still in Cockpit Country. You look outside your kitchen window every day, and my good friend Bishop Clark knows he's still in Cockpit Country.
Yes.
So we need to make sure that Cockpit Country landscape properly is protected. So if we can get a protected area boundary, for example, gazetted and defined, then that means we can protect that, as the Prime Minister said, for no mining in the protected area. But we also need to make sure that we have a buffer zone to include the larger Cockpit Country area to protect all of the fresh water sources. You know, if we don't protect below ground, then we lose the water resources above ground. So we really need to understand that Cockpit Country landscape, whatever boundary a human imposes on it, it still naturally has its functions and its relationships that we actually need to be smart enough to understand. We need to let Cockpit Country tell us where it is so that we can actually protect it properly, because if we don't listen to Cockpit Country and what it has to tell us about the water resources and the heritage resources and everything else that it is, then we won't protect it properly. So that was my job, was just to try and hopefully clarify some of the confusion that still surrounds the various boundaries that have been presented.
And we will now hear from Bishop Clark, who is the chairman of the Gibraltar All Age and a resident in Gibraltar, which presently is being mined on the lease 172.
Good evening, everyone. I am Bishop Clark, as I've already heard. I am disturbed and I am concerned about the mining in the community, especially where the school is at the time. One of the main problems we do have, the water disturbance there. We know that when the catchment is the main source of water for the school. And so when it rains, it washes into the tank, which is a container for the school. The children have to use that water. Secondly, the dust nuisance in the community. When you look at the asthma and the sinus of the children have been developed from the dust nuisance. Teachers also are having the same problem. Teachers have to be taking leave from school because of the dust nuisance. And that's on the strength of that, I am so disturbed about the whole situation. And we have noticed also right beside the school now where they have alleged to mine, it is so close to the school that children having a problem. You know, when it is school session, when school is in session, children are unable to concentrate because of noise. And so that is my deepest concern. I'm here today.
Is that an interview? But I was wanting to know how many kids have been affected by this.
The school is now present. We have 200 plus students enrolled there. So within that, we know that all of them have been disturbed.
Lots of teachers.
Also, teachers decide to resign, and I am asking them to stay on because of this nuisance. And so my principal is having a hard time right now because we have been asking teachers, please do not resign, although they have tendered their resignation, but we have been working on that.
How many teachers?
Well, so far I have received 2 letters. I got 3, but I hold on to 1, so it's 2 teachers.
Okay, we're now going to hear from Mr. Barnes, who will share with us. Mr. Barnes.
Can you just
Come in some more, Mr. Barnes. Mr. Barnes is also a resident of Gibraltar.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I am so concerned about the mining in Gibraltar because I am so infected about the mining in Gibraltar because where they are taking the mining from right now is just next door I live, and even the road what cut it on my land is line on line, and I have 2 grandkids there. Sinus is killing them and asthma. And many times I go to my drum to take up a pail of water or anything. When you're looking at the drum bottom, you can see the red dirt, the mining dirt circle in the drum. And because that I have to go to the brownstone buying water to give my kids and things because I'm afraid to give them the water. I can remember around a month ago, the water infect my kids in a way there's a pure bump. Come up upon him, the I can go to the doctor 2 times. And he's not believe that it's joke I am making, that it's true thing. Bump up the whole of them skin come out in a sore, and I know that is the water. Cause it. So I'm just asking the President and the Prime Minister to just give a talk in that and done with the mining in our community.
compensation, have you been compensating where that is concerned?
Compensation, did you get any compensation?
Yes, we are getting a compensation of first, them usually give us 5,500 and tell them
Every 3 months.
every 3 months. Now them are giving me 8,500 for every 3 months, and them come in now they give $12,000 monthly. And when I look on really what is going on, they have no use to what the water, the effect what the water is giving unto us.
Before Valentin speaks, and Valentin is here in 2 capacities because he's also the caretaker for the PNP in the constituency where Gibraltar falls, which is Southwest St. Anne. But what we have seen, and this is where we are calling for an immediate cost-benefit analysis to be done in terms of mining and the country. We all know that mining contributes economically to the country in terms of foreign exchange. There's no doubt about that. But what we do not know scientifically is what is the economic impact on people's lives. We're talking about farmers who have been displaced. We're talking about families who have been displaced, whether voluntarily or otherwise. We're talking about lands that once used to be farmlands, which having now been mined out are now craters and no mining can take place. And so what we're doing is we're creating poorer communities. We're talking about the physical well-being of persons. You know, Mr. Jerome spoke about the bombs. We went to a site visit in St. Elizabeth and we met with members in the community, and they too share with us the many skin irritation that they have been experiencing due to what we call the dust nuisance. In other words, when the trucks are passing or the mining is taking place and the dust that pollutes the air. He talks about the water situation, and again, we cannot underscore the importance of that because these communities are largely dependent on rainwater. And with their containers, some of them are open, but even when they're closed, what you find happening is that the dust goes in and it takes home there, and they have to use that water for drinking or for domestic use. You know, what one community member shared with me the fact that having put her clothes in the water, they change color because of the caustic and acidic content of the water. And these are some of the things that we do not talk about, but these are some of the things that we must deal with, because the time has come for us to seriously take a look at how bauxite mining affects the regular person in these communities. And we have the issues of titling. For too long, persons who are living in bauxite communities have gone without their titles. And every time there's an effort to give them title, you hear that they have to do a grant of probate or a grant of administration for many, many generations. And so many persons are now senior citizens and after many decades still have not received a title to their property. And so we are calling on the government to do more than just that committee that has been set up in the ministry to deal with bauxite mining and titles. We have to ensure that the proper legislation is in place. And, you know, I once in my presentation in the Senate called for a special piece of legislation, a sunset legislation to deal with bauxite mining communities. And I'm again making that appeal that the government looks seriously at designing a particular piece of legislation that will focus on persons within bauxite communities and them getting their titles. And the other thing as well is that, you know, the relationship that the bauxite communities have with, or the bauxite companies have with the community, must be improved. Again, there is a role and a function for the Jamaica Bauxite Institute, and we are calling on the arms of government to do what they're supposed to do. We are calling on the National Environment Planning Authority to do what it is supposed to do. Mining cannot take place. A mining license ought not to be granted pursuant to the NRCA Act without an environmental impact assessment. But we know that the minister has given a lease to Naranda for mining to take place without the environment impact assessment being done. And so we are calling on the government to stop that kind of, you know, irregularity and do well for the Jamaican people, because they deserve better than that. Our children deserve better than that. Our farmers in these bauxite mining communities, they do deserve better than that. And we're asking the government to have meaningful dialogue, not voluntary dialogue, but meaningful dialogue where they go into the communities and they sit with these persons and hear from them their issues and make every effort to address these issues. Because, you know, it is said that there's another 30 years of bauxite to be done. And I believe that the Jamaican people have gone through enough for the last 40 years. And to give them another 30 years of this kind of unfair treatment is really not doing well for the Jamaican people. And we should, after all these years, after all these decades, after everything that our forefathers have gone through, the least we can do is to ensure that all Jamaicans enjoy that right to a clean and a healthy environment. Val?
Thank you, Senator Baines. You know, my problem is that there seems to be no sustainable development plan as it relates to bauxite mining. You know, having reached the point of mining taking place in this country for nearly 76 years, we notice that many of the areas that have been mined remain grossly underdeveloped. As it relates to stripping the topsoil, removing all vegetation, in many instances, they remove all the fruit trees. And there's no policy in place that is adhered to, that you replant these fruit trees. Fruit remains a part of the food staple in this country. And mining in the Garden Parish southern St. Anne, it cannot be acceptable that we remove the nutraceutical value, removing the trees having medicinal value, removing the fruit trees, and there's no program of replanting. I would suggest that to every fruit tree that you remove, you plant 2. Instead, they plant grass, wild grass. Are we to believe that the people should eat grass? Is it that the people are cows? We really need to take a second look. The time has come now for a proper cost-benefit analysis be done in these areas. There is no way mining can continue at the expense of the people's lives. The matter of health, with respect to the many illnesses that come as a result of mining, sinusitis and asthma, I believe that there ought to be a proper program where health aid is given to these communities on a regular basis. It can't be that people are sick, children can't go to school because of these illnesses, and the government and the bauxite company give a blind eye to this. It cannot continue like this.
Can you give me my title again, please?
My name is Val Wint, and I'm the caretaker candidate for Southwestern St. Anne, and also a member of the Environmental Planning and Land Task Force.